Sawadee-kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're studying the words of the Buddha in Volume 3, chapters 81 through 90. Here we're going to be exploring multiple chapters where we're using the words of the Buddha to be able to dive in and penetrate into his teachings, to learn them, to reflect on them, to independently verify them and practice them. And the way that we do this study group is I invite anybody who's in Zoom to be able to volunteer to read a chapter. After someone reads a chapter, I'll share some teachings on that chapter. Then I'll open up to any and all questions that you might have. If you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can ask questions by putting those into the comment section, or in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically and ask any and all questions that you like. You can get access to these books by downloading them from our website for free. That's buddhadailywisdom.com, and you'll see the link for free books, and you can access them and either read them before or after class. And you can even get them as printed versions too by taking it and go printing it yourself, by getting a printed version on Amazon if you have access to Amazon, or you can get them at the temple here in Chiang Mai and just reimbursing us for our printing costs. So welcome to all of you guys, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly. And I'd like to invite all of you in Zoom, if you'd like to read, just let me know by electronically raising your hand. Okay, it looks like Samantha's volunteering. So if you'd like to read this first one, go ahead.
The simile of the tortoise. Monks, in the past, a tortoise was searching for food along the bank of a river one evening. On that same evening, a jackal was also searching for food along the bank of that same river. When the tortoise saw the jackal in the distance searching for food, it drew its limbs and neck inside its shell and passed the time, keeping still and silent. The jackal had also seen the tortoise in the distance searching for food, so he approached and waited close by, thinking, when this tortoise extends one or another of its limb or its neck, I will grab it on the spot, pull it out, and eat it. But because the tortoise did not extend any of its limbs or its neck, the jackal, failing to gain access to it, lost interest in it and departed. So too, monks, Mara, the evil one, is constantly and continually waiting close by you, thinking, perhaps I will gain access to him through the eye or through the ear or through the nose or through the tongue or through the mind or through the body. Therefore, monks, reside guarding the doors of the 6 sense bases. Having seen a form with the eye, having heard a sound with the ear, having smelt an odor with the nose, having tasted a flavor with the tongue, having touched a physical object with the body, having recognized a mental object with the mind, do not grasp its signs and features. Since, if you leave the eye sense base unguarded, the ear sense unguarded, the nose sense unguarded, the tongue sense base unguarded, the body sense base unguarded, the mind sense base unguarded, evil, unwholesome states of craving and displeasure might invade you. Practice the way of its restraint. Guard the eye sense base, the ear sense base, the nose sense base, the tongue sense base, the body sense base, the mind sense base. Undertake the restraint of the eye sense base, the ear sense base, the nose sense base, the tongue base, the body sense base, and the mind sense base. When monks, you reside guarding the doors of the 6 sense bases, Mara, the evil one, failing to gain access to you, will lose interest in you and depart, just as the jackal departed from the tortoise. Drawing in the mind's thoughts as a tortoise draws its limbs into its shell, independent, not harassing others, fully extinguished, a monk would not blame anyone.
Okay, thank you, Samantha. So if someone understands the 6 sense bases, which I'm pretty sure all of you guys that are studying here in Zoom understand those because you've studied them in other classes, where you understand how the mind has this central desire, where the mind's longing, yearning through the sense bases, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind itself. The mind is wanting agreeable contact. The mind's craving and longing, yearning. It's wanting this agreeable contact. And when it gets what it wants, it gets those pleasant feelings. And when it doesn't get what it wants, it gets the painful ones. So the Buddha is here now relating this to a tortoise, that a tortoise has 6 limbs. It has its 4 feet, and it's got its head and its tail. And as it's walking and it's got its limbs extended, this jackal sees it in the distance, and the turtle also sees the jackal. But what the turtle does to protect itself and to guard itself is it draws in its limbs. And this is what the Buddha is guiding us to do when we're restraining our mind. When you see the mind as longing, yearning through the sense spaces, you draw it in, you restrain the mind, you pull it back, almost like riding a horse. Whereas if you're out and about and you see your mind longing and yearning and you've got your craving way out there extended, you know that there's going to be either conditional pleasant feelings, painful feelings, or neither painful nor pleasant. And even if you get those conditional pleasant feelings, there's going to be painful ones waiting for you right around the corner. So you would like to draw in the mind's craving, desire, attachment, and look at fulfilling your needs. And what is it that you really need, rather than chasing after the wants, the longing, the yearning, the mind chasing after the objects of its affection. And if you allow the mind to continue to long and yearn like this, what the Buddha is describing here is about this formless being Mara, where some of us might have referred to this being as the devil or Satan or Lucifer. This is a real actual being. It's a formless being that is interested in causing calamity in the world. And this being and beings operating on its behalf will attempt to influence people. And the way that it does that is it tries to influence you and entices you through one of your sense bases. Because as long as you're craving and you're longing and yearning, now as you chase after those things, you're going to make unwise decisions. So one of the examples I gave this morning at the temple is like, say you're walking down the street, and let's just say that you're working to get away from alcohol and partying, and maybe this was something you did in the past, and you're trying to get away from this. But you're walking down the street and you hear this music coming out of the bar, you hear laughter and people, joking it up, and your mind now is longing, yearning, and you get pulled into that situation. Well, now, if you act on that and you act on that craving and you go into the bar, you start drinking, you start partying, it's very likely that maybe someone steals some money from you. There could be a fight. There could be problems in different situations because you're around all these people who are intoxicated. It would be unwise to go there, right? But if you have craving, desire, attachment, this is Mara, the evil one's able to kind of entice you and pull you into that. It's your decisions that are doing that. Mara can't make decisions for you, but you give Mara access to you by allowing craving, desire, attachment to continue to reside in the mind. By allowing the central desire to continue to reside in the mind, then you can easily be pulled in one direction or another. So what the Buddha is teaching you is to guard the mind and pull the limbs in, just like the tortoise. So you pull in the craving, desire, attachment and not allow it to be extended out like that. Here's another example. Say you were on Facebook and say that you were writing out some comments, maybe somebody asked you a question, or maybe you saw something on Facebook and you would like to kind of make a little comment. Well, now, if you really want to be perceived in the world a certain way based on your comment, say you're trying to be funny or witty or something like this, and now somebody comments something negative and degrading about what it is that you said. Maybe they reply to you in a negative and degrading way. Well, if your craving, desire, attachment is extended out there, where you really want to be perceived by others in a certain way, you might start replying to this person, start arguing with them, starting to try to defend yourself, when in reality, the best thing to do in these situations is just ignore it. If someone's being bitter and harsh and hostile, if they're being degrading and disparaging, if they're not being polite and respectful, no need to reply to them. Because if you reply to these kinds of individuals, then you're just going to have more and more and more of those types of people replying to you. And you're going to attract that kind of, people that are around you. Whereas when somebody comments like that, if you just ignore it, that's the best thing. Or if it's on your Facebook and you can just delete it, right? You can look at my Facebook, you can look at our Facebook group. We don't have people commenting negative and degrading things. We did in the past for about a good year and a half, 2 years, but I deleted enough of those. I, did things like that, or I just didn't reply to people. And you can see that now there's nobody around that's actually doing those kinds of things. And this is how you can cultivate wholesome life around you, is by making wise decisions. Whereas if you argued and you were just as bitter and harsh and hostile back to them, You're just keeping things going. So what the Buddha is teaching you to do is restrain the mind. And you need to do it not only in those big cases where you're walking down the street and you hear music and laughter and you're hearing the people drinking and using drugs and stuff like that. Of course, a lot of us have gotten past that and we're no longer even close to those kinds of things. But even to the subtle things of just, where somebody maybe is trying to draw you into an argument. And this isn't necessarily Mara themselves trying to draw you into an argument, but Mara does do things to try to influence us and beings operating on Mara's behalf. Because if somebody has a lot of darkness in their mind, if they have a lot of craving, anger, and ignorance themselves, these beings are almost functioning like afflicted spirits or animals or hell beings, and they can easily kind of draw you into an argument or something else, which is just going to preclude you from getting to enlightenment. If you're sitting there arguing, you're not going to be able to get to enlightenment that way. So you need to have enough wisdom to step away from those things. And that's where the Buddha talks about reside, guarding the doors to the six sense bases. Otherwise, these beings that are looking to entice you into unwholesome things, they're going to keep trying. But if you're guarding your doors and you never go down that path, then they're going to fail to gain access to you. They're going to lose interest in you and they're going to depart. Just like the jackal, you'll find that unwholesome people will tend to go away from you and you won't have these kinds of things going on around you. So just as the turtle draws in its limbs into the shell, draw in the thoughts, draw in the longing, yearning. That's what the Buddha is teaching you. And then ultimately what he gets to here is that you can operate independently. You're not attached. You don't need somebody else to restrain you. You don't need your friends or your family or people like that. You're not harassing others. You fully extinguish the pollutions of the mind. And lastly, what he says here is that essentially a student who's practicing these teachings closely wouldn't blame anyone for the unwise decisions that you make. Oftentimes, this is what one does in the unenlightened state, is when something goes in a way that's unwholesome, you might look for somebody to blame. But someone who's awoken to this wisdom, they won't blame anybody for the things that they're experiencing. You experience a particular thing, and you'll figure out how to extinguish this unwholesome karma. And eventually, you'll get to the point where you don't have any unwholesome karma because you've extinguished it all. Because as long as you're longing, yearning through the sense bases, you're operating based on craving, you're going to experience unwholesome results. But when you draw in your limbs and you're no longer operating on craving, anger, and ignorance, then you're going to start to make wiser and wiser decisions, and you're going to extinguish all this unwholesome karma, and you'll get to the point where you're only experiencing wholesome results. So let me know what questions you guys have here by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or raise your hand in Zoom and let me know what questions you have. So it looks like Vibhav has a question. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, David. Actually, maybe I have two questions on different sense spaces. So one thing happened yesterday. I went to the office cafeteria, and I wanted to eat a banana in the morning. That's what I tried to do. But there was food there which smelled really good, so I took some of it. So but I only took a little bit, not too much. Is that guarding the sense spaces or not guarding the sense spaces?
Was this your food, or was it food for purchase, or what was it?
I mean, it's food provided by the company. It's free food.
Okay. So was it something that you needed to eat? Like you were hungry and you decided to eat, or what was that?
Yeah, it was breakfast, so I decided to eat breakfast. So I had to eat some breakfast. So usually I just try to eat a banana and restrict it to that. That's what I've been trying to do to reduce the amount of food in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
But yesterday the food just smells good. So I just decided to eat a little bit of it.
Yeah, if you're eating in moderation, this can be just fine, right? It's when you're gorging or you're eating based on emotion, that's what you would like to eliminate. So the six sense bases here, it's not just that you're hungry and you decide to eat. Yes, the six sense bases are involved in that, but it doesn't mean you have to be longing, yearning in order to eat if you're just choosing to eat. So I couldn't sit here and tell you whether you had any craving, desire, attachment in that situation, because all that happened is somebody ate some food. That's where your mindfulness has to come into play. That's why the Buddha says here that you need to be independent, right? You need to be able to have the wisdom and having cultivated the qualities of mind to be able to know yourself whether or not you were craving in that moment or not. You have to be able to see the mind very clearly.
There was craving for like, because it smelled good, so I did eat it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have eaten it.
Mm-hmm.
But just, so I think there was some craving of like, because the smell was good, so there was some craving.
Okay, so the next time you're in that situation to test your mind is you go into the cafeteria, you smell the food, just choose to walk away and don't eat and observe the mind. See if the mind's agitated or frustrated or like, oh man, I should have got that food. Like, why didn't I get that food? You can observe the mind and see for yourself. So sometimes when you're not quite sure if it's a craving or not, you can actually put the mind in those kinds of situations and walk away from it and see how the mind responds, or if does it react in that situation, or is it just completely content and peaceful? Because if you don't know 100% of whether or not it's a craving or not, you need to be able to see that for yourself. But there are situations where, an enlightened being might smell some food and be like, oh, this smells really good, let me have some food, and you just eat. So that's where you got to really be able to see with your own mindfulness that it's not just the action of choosing to eat, it's what's going on in your mind, and you got to be able to see if it's longing, yearning, and pulling towards something or not.
Okay, thank you. The second question is around like, I think we talked about like having a discussion or like having not an argument but back and forth with persons. So I've had a new teammate join the team, and it seems to me that they have this habit of being very defensive and like trying to like having to answer everything and going back and forth without trying to understand what problem they're trying to solve. So it's kind of becoming almost to the point of being argumentative. I'm trying to follow the factors of rightful speech, and make sure that I'm not being I'm not being harsh or anything like that. But it does seem like there is a lot of back and forth which is avoidable. But there's also some time pressures to finish the work and get the work done. So in these cases where the other person seems to have this thing of having to like argue or like having to say something for everything that you say, how do you kind of work with this situation without like making sure that you're not like end up practicing some unrightful speech?
Yeah, each situation is different. You know what the 5 factors of well-spoken speech are and all the other aspects of the Eightfold Path, because we've talked about that recently. So just be sure you're practicing that and maintain your calmness and composure. And if you need to get up and walk away from a conversation, you can do that, right? Ultimately, as a manager, or I'm not sure what your role is, if you're a manager or team leader or how they cast you, but nonetheless, one of your roles is to help your employees, your team members to develop. This isn't going to solve any discontentedness that may or may not be existing in your own mind, but this is something that you could potentially do is now that you've getting to know this person is to sit down with them and help them to understand some of the areas of improvement that they can improve for their professional career, because it's not only going to help when he or she is working on this particular team, but as they advance in their career, this is going to help them in those situations too. So if you feel like you have enough relationship with this person that you can sit down and talk with them as the team leader or as the manager, this would be wise. But just understand that that's not going to solve any discontentedness that you have. You can even just outright share with this person if they're becoming argumentative. You can even share like, hey, I know you're new to the team. I would just like to let you know that I'm not interested in arguing with anybody. And if that's where this conversation is headed, I would rather just pause it and we can come back at a time when we're able to have a professional conversation, because I would much rather have those types of conversations because it's much better for our project team. So, you can check in with the person, and sometimes they may not even know themselves, their own mind. You might actually have to just make the decision yourself. You might have to say, hey, look, I would like to pause this discussion. I feel like it's headed towards an argument, and I'm not interested in that because that's not the way I like to interact with the members of the team. So I'm going to step away and let's catch up in a couple of days after we've had a chance to think things through, and we can come at this with a more calm head. So not only are you ending the conversation and stepping away, but you're communicating the type of relationship that you would like to have with all your employees in this employee themselves, because being new to the team, they might not understand how you choose to function as a team leader, and you might have to share a little bit of that in the way that you're interacting with them.
I think that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make sure I'm following the factors of well-spoken speech. So.
Yep, that's the way you got to do it, is just keep staying with the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. But at the same time, you need to have enough wisdom to understand how to impart wisdom with your members of your team. So like sometimes at the temple, there can be a student maybe twice a year, 3 times a year, that starts to become a little bit disrespectful or arrogant or hostile or harsh. And there's times where I just end the conversation, even in the group of 30, 40, 60 people. I would just say, hey, this isn't the type of conversation, or this isn't the type of relationship that I prefer to have with students. And I would rather just end the conversation here and let's move on to another topic. So sometimes you need to be able to do that in order to maintain the environment that you're having. So it's not just about knowing the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. As you're practicing at higher and higher levels, you need to be able to impart wisdom about the types of relationships that you would like to have as a manager, and you would like to communicate that in a way that this person can understand. And then it allows them to understand how you interact with people, so that then they can bring their practice up. Because if they're being argumentative, then of course they're not practicing these teachings. And you are practicing these teachings, but you can't just say, hey, look, there's these 4 noble truths, there's this 8-fold path, like, why don't you just practice this? But you can impart little amounts of wisdom here and there with your teammates and your direct reports, the people who are reporting to you. And this is something that is best talked about on a case-by-case basis, so that we can get into the details and I can show you examples and things like this, because you're not going to be in a situation where people come preloaded with, wisdom of how to function in a professional environment. Sometimes one of the things a manager is doing is helping their employees to learn how to be more professional.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I can read the next one if nobody else.
Okay, let me take a look here on social media and see if we have any questions coming in. All right, I don't see any questions anywhere. So, all right, Vibhav, let's take this next one. This is a simile as well.
Thank you. Simile of the bowl of oil. Monks, suppose that on hearing the most beautiful girl of the land, a great crowd of people would assemble. Now that most beautiful girl of the land would dance exquisitely and sing exquisitely. On hearing, the most beautiful girl of the land is dancing, the most beautiful girl of the land is singing, an even larger crowd of people would assemble. Then a man would come along, aspiring to live, not aspiring to die, aspiring to for peacefulness, uninterested in discontentedness. Someone would say to him, good man, you must carry around the bowl of oil filled to the brim between the crowd and the most beautiful girl of the land. A man with a drawn sword will be following right behind you, and wherever you spill even a little of it, right there he will cut off your head. What do you think, monks? Would the man stop attending to that bowl of oil and out of negligence turn his attention outwards? No, venerable sir. I have made up the simile, monks, in order to convey a meaning. This here is the meaning. The bowl of oil filled to the brim. This is a designation for mindfulness directed to the body. Therefore, monks, you should train yourselves thus. We will develop and cultivate mindfulness directed to the body, make it our vehicle, make it our basis, stabilize it, exercise ourselves in it, and fully perfect it. Thus, monks, should you train yourselves. Monks, those who do not take part in mindfulness directed to the body do not take part in the deathless enlightenment. Those who take part in mindfulness directed to the body, take part in the deathless. Monks, those who are unattentive about mindfulness directed to the body are unattentive about the deathless. Those who are attentive about the mindfulness directed to the body are attentive about the deathless enlightenment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vibhav. So what I encourage you guys to do is, whenever you're seeing a simile like this from the Buddha, is like literally put yourself in the situation that he's talking about and he's describing and try to visualize it very vividly, right? So he's talking about this most beautiful girl of the land, but we can make that a guy too, depending on your preference, right? The most handsome guy in the land, the most beautiful girl, the best singer, right, is on one side. And then you've got this large crowd on the other side that's cheering and, cheering on this person, right? And now you're in the middle with this bowl of oil walking between the most handsome or most beautiful person and then this crowd. And there's this person behind you with a sword that if you drop even one little drop of that oil with the bowl filled to the brim, they're going to chop off your head, right? And of course, you're interested in living, right? So this is a pretty graphic simile, but this is the way that you teach an oral tradition is you give stories, and the more graphic they are, the better, because people will remember them, right? And as you're carrying this bowl, what the Buddha is saying is, what would you do? Would you be looking at the most beautiful girl or that handsome man, or would you be looking at the crowd? Like, what would you be doing? No, you'd be paying close attention to this bowl of oil because you're not interested in getting your head chopped off. So it's the same thing with your mindfulness, is the Buddha is saying that you should give that same level of attention to your mindfulness or your awareness of mind in day-to-day life, because that's what's going to actually lead to enlightenment. Here, he's specifically talking about the mindfulness directed to the body. And whenever he's talking about that, that's that first foundation of mindfulness of the bodily sensations. Remember, there's the bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects. And you're going to need to have awareness of mind for all four of those things in order to get to enlightenment. And what he's saying is those who do not take part in essentially understanding the bodily sensations and having awareness of those bodily sensations associated with the arising of discontentedness, because right there, you're supposed to cut that off and let it go. If you're not attentive to that, if you're not aware of that, then you're not taking part in the deathless. What he means by the deathless is he oftentimes refers to enlightenment in this way, because in the unenlightened state, if this body is expired and it's done, we call that death, where this being has now died and now you're going to experience rebirth over and over and over again. But if you've gotten to enlightenment and then this body is expired, we don't call that death. We call that final enlightenment. So once an individual gets to enlightenment, we say that they are now experiencing the deathless element, or they are now part of the deathless, meaning they will never die ever again. Because by the time you get to enlightenment, this body is impermanent and this body will go away. The mind will separate and go away. And we refer to this as final enlightenment, because during your life, even as an enlightened being, you're going to still experience pain. You can get rid of all your mental anguish, but you can't get rid of the physical pain. In the unenlightened state, if you experience physical pain, you're going to experience the physical pain, but then you're going to experience the mental anguish that goes along with it. And that actually heightens the physical pain. The Buddha describes this in one of his discourses as being hit by two darts, that you get hit with the first dart, which is the physical pain. And then if you're unenlightened and you lack wisdom, you're going to get hit with the second dart, which now there's the mental anguish. And now that heightens the physical pain. If you can ever think back to a time where you've maybe stumped your toe, you felt the physical pain, and then like a second later, the mind experienced the mental anguish, where you might have started cussing and being upset and angry and, whatever you were doing at that time. This is what one experiences when they lack wisdom, because you feel the physical pain and then the mind's craving kicks in, where the mind wants the body to be permanently comfortable. And when the mind's not getting what it wants, which is the body to be permanently comfortable, then those painful feelings of anger and frustration start to arise. So that's what one experiences in the unenlightened state when there's a lack of wisdom. But as your mind's getting closer and closer to enlightenment and your mind is actually enlightened, if you stump your toe, you'll feel the physical pain, but you won't experience the mental anguish, because there's no craving for this body to be permanently comfortable. That the mind understands when you stump your toe that this is impermanent. And you might start laughing, you might start rubbing your toe, whatever it is that you might do, but you're not going to get angry and bitter and hostile and harsh. You're not going to experience any mental anguish at all. So the physical pain that you experience in the enlightened mental state is very muted compared to what you experience in the unenlightened state. you can experience physical pain in the enlightened mental state, and you actually need this for a reason. Because as an enlightened being, if you're standing too close to a fire, for example, you need to be able to feel that so that you can then know, this body is too close to a fire. Let me move away from this. You can make a decision to move away from it. So you still need that little bit of physical pain there, but it's very muted and very minor, and you're not going to have the mental anguish along with it. So when you get to enlightenment and this body is at the end of this life, that's where the body and the mind separate. That's the one thing that you can't accomplish while there's still life. You can't separate the mind and the body. But once you do, that's where you'll no longer experience any physical pain. And that's what we call final enlightenment. And that's why we call it final enlightenment, because that's where the last attachment there, that last thing is gone, right? So the Buddha refers to this as the deathless, that when you get to enlightenment and you're at the end of this life, that you actually haven't died, you're experiencing final enlightenment. And he refers to it as the deathless. Okay, so the Buddha is saying that if you're not aware of those bodily sensations that are associated with the cravings, desires, attachments that are rising up, then you're not actually making your way to enlightenment. So you need to be able to develop the part of the mindfulness where you're aware of those bodily sensations. And then you can cut it off and let it go. And he says, those who take part in mindfulness directed at the body, they take part in the deathless, meaning they are making their way and working towards this enlightened mental state. If you get to the point where every single time the mind is getting discontent, you notice it as a bodily sensation and you cut it off and let it go there, enlightenment is about 1 to 3 years away at that point. You guys know that this journey isn't a 1 week, 1 month, 1 year thing. It's a long-term journey, but it's a final solution. It's a permanent solution once you get to enlightenment. So as you're training your mind and you're developing your mindfulness through breathing mindfulness meditation, and you're training the mind to let go with breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity, you would ultimately like to get to the point where you can be aware of any arising discontentedness as a bodily sensation. And if you can get to that point where every single time you notice it as a bodily sensation and you can cut it off and let it go, enlightenment is about 1 to 3 years away. Because as long as you keep allowing the discontentedness to move past the bodily sensations into a feeling, then the mind's staying wired that way. The mind's staying wired to have conditional feelings. But if you're getting to the point where it's like 3 months, 6 months, a year, and you're catching it every single time as a bodily sensation, the mind's no longer being wired to have a conditioned feeling. Every single time you keep cutting it off and cutting it off and cutting it off. And this is going to rewire the mind where it's no longer forming conditional feelings. And you can get to more and more peace, more and more joy. You'll see the mind's brightening up, and you'll see that the mind's very stable and concentrated and peaceful because of this. So that's what the Buddha is describing here, is developing this mindfulness. So here he's describing it in a little bit different way. Instead of saying those who do not take part in mindfulness, he's saying those who are unattentive about mindfulness directed at the body. Essentially, this person isn't working towards enlightenment. So you guys are aware of this, and you are continuing developing through your breathing mindfulness meditation, but also you need to be practicing mindfulness all day long. That's your guard. Just like the tortoise is guarding its limbs, you need to guard the mind with your mindfulness, where the mind is being protected by the mindfulness. And I described this recently in a class, talking about it like a virus scanner. If you think about a virus scanner always running, and then whenever there's a virus on your hard drive, the virus scanner pops into action, it quarantines it, it cleans it up, and gets rid of it off of your hard drive. So back there in the background, you've always got this virus scanner running, and then it takes action as it needs to. And that's what your mindfulness is doing, that it should be running all the time. And then whenever it needs to take action, it takes action. So whenever you see those bodily sensations, boom, take action. That's like quarantining the virus and cleaning it up and getting it off your hard drive. You'd like to do the same thing within your mind, is take action to be able to cut off and let go of any arising discontentedness as a bodily sensation. And of course, you're going to miss it sometimes. On your way to enlightenment and your mindfulness isn't fully developed yet, you're going to miss it sometimes. And if that's okay, if that happens, it's okay. Don't beat yourself up about it, but just get more and more clued into it and look at it very closely and figure out what are those feelings that you're having and what were the bodily sensations that were happening just before that, because these are going to be unique to you. And if you can clue into what those bodily sensations were, now you can be more and more attentive to them in the future. And this will allow you to essentially rewire the mind and get to the point where you can take action every single time. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this one. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So let's move to the next one. Is there someone who would like to volunteer to read this one? Okay, looks like Pat. Go ahead, sir. And then Roxanne, we can come to you after that.
Great good of mindfulness directed to the body. Monks, those who do not take part in mindfulness directed to the body do not take part in the deathless. Those who take part in mindfulness directed to the body take part in the deathless. Monks, those who are unattentive about mindfulness directed to the body are unattentive about the deathless. Those who are attentive about mindfulness directed to the body are attentive about the deathless.
Okay, thank you, sir. So this is the ending of the last discourse, and it's just kind of called out so that you can really see how important it is to be able to develop the awareness of the bodily sensations. This is something that you would like to actively be working towards, all the while understanding that it's a work in progress, and you'd like to get better and better at this. As I mentioned last class, I've seen these bodily sensations last anywhere from 1 second all the way up to 8 or 10 seconds. The more you develop your mind, you're going to see this elongated period of time where these bodily sensations are there. That's the preliminary kind of early warning system alerting you that the mind is about to become discontent. And the way this might look early in practice is you're just like redirecting the mind. Over time, you'll be able to internally cut off and let go of this bodily sensations that are arising. But early on, you might need to like physically get up and go somewhere else in order to redirect the mind. And this can actually be really helpful to train your mind to let go. So keep that in mind, that physically redirecting the mind, if you're looking at something or you're hearing something, you're smelling something, you're tasting something, something's in touch with the body, there's something going on through the mind, you're experiencing some contact through the 6 sense spaces, and you're starting to notice the bodily sensations associated with discontentedness, you can just, boom, redirect the mind, take it in another direction. And this can end the contact that you're having, and it can train the mind to let go and not allow the mind to get that discontent feeling. Because if you keep allowing the mind to dwell in that discontentedness, if you keep allowing the mind to stay wired that way, it's going to keep doing that. It's going to keep forming these conditional feelings. And you like to get to the point where you're cutting it off, and cutting it off. So any questions here? I'm not sure if you guys have anything, since it was something that we just talked about, but I'll just pause and see if you guys have anything. Okay, I'm not seeing anything anywhere. So let's go to the next one. This is chapter 84. Is there someone who would like to read this? I think Roxanne was going to. Yeah, there you go, ma'am. All right, go ahead.
Training a mind filled with loving kindness without hostility or ill will. Monks, there are these 5 courses of speech that others may use when they address you. 1, their speech may be timely or untimely. 2, true or untrue. 3, gentle or harsh. 4, connected with benefit or unbeneficial. 5, spoken with a mind of loving kindness or with inner hate. Herein, monks, you should train thus. Our minds will remain unaffected, and we shall speak no evil words. We shall reside compassionate for their welfare, with a mind of loving kindness without inner hate. We shall reside enveloping that person with a mind filled with loving kindness, and starting with him, we shall reside enveloping that all-encompassing world with a mind filled with loving kindness, abundant, joyful, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. That is how you should train monks. Monks, suppose a man came with crimson, turmeric, indigo, and carmine and said, I shall draw pictures and make pictures appear on empty space. What do you think, monks? Could that man draw pictures and make pictures appear on empty space? No, venerable sir. Why is that? Because empty space is formless and invisible. He cannot possibly draw pictures there or make pictures appear there. Eventually, the man would reap only tiredness and disappointment. So too, monks, there are these 5 courses of speech that others may use when they address you. Herein, monks, you should train thus. Our minds will remain unaffected, and we shall speak no evil words. We shall reside compassionate for their welfare with a mind of loving kindness without inner hate. We shall reside enveloping them with a mind filled with loving kindness, and starting with them, we shall reside enveloping the all-encompassing world with a mind filled with loving kindness, abundant, joyful, immeasurable, without hostility, and without ill will. This is how you should train monks. The Buddha also spoke several other similes, a simile of a man who came with a hoe and a basket and said, I shall make the great earth be without earth, a simile of a man with a blazing grass torch and said, I shall heat up and burn away the river Ganges with this blazing grass torch. Eventually, that man would reap only tiredness and disappointment. Monks, even if criminals were to sever you savagely limb by limb with a 2-handled saw, he who gave rise to the mind of hate towards them would not be practicing my teachings. Hang on.
Sure, have a little drink. I'll have one too.
Herein, monks, you should train thus. Our minds will remain unaffected, and we shall speak no evil words. We shall reside compassionate for their welfare with a mind of loving kindness without inner hate. We shall reside enveloping them with a mind filled with loving kindness, and starting with them, we shall reside enveloping an all-encompassing world with a mind filled with loving kindness, abundant, joyful, immeasurable, without hostility, without ill will. This is how you should train monks. Monks, if you keep this advice on the simile of the saw constantly in mind, do you see any course of speech, insignificant or significant, that you could not endure? No, venerable sir. Therefore, monks, you should keep this advice on the simile of the saw constantly in mind. That will lead you to your welfare and peacefulness for a long time.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So going back all the way up here to the top, the Buddha is essentially saying, okay, there's these 5 courses of speech that others might use at any given time with you. They might speak timely or untimely, true or untrue, gentle or harsh, beneficial or unbeneficial, with a mind of loving kindness or a mind of inner hate. For those of you guys that know the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, you can see those here because that's what we're training to do, is speak timely, true, gentle, beneficial, and with a mind of loving kindness. That's the natural laws. And when you practice the natural laws, you'll see that all your conversations will go wonderful. You won't have any problems in any of your conversations. But there's going to be situations, even when you're enlightened, when people will speak to you in untimely ways. They will speak falsehoods. They will speak untruths. They will speak harsh. They will speak unbeneficial, and they will speak with a mind of inner hate. Not only will they speak that way ultimately when you become enlightened, but definitely on your way to enlightenment, you're going to experience some of these things because you've spoken this way in the past, and now that gamma is going to come back to you. You're going to need to experience that unwholesome gamma coming back to you. So what the Buddha is saying is when people are speaking to you in these ways, your mind should remain unaffected, right? That it's what he's guiding you to be able to do is have this compassion and this loving kindness towards all beings. So even when individuals are speaking to you in unwise ways, you would like to reside with compassion and loving kindness towards them. Because being bitter and harsh and hostile back, that's just keeping the problem going on. You're putting out the bitterness and hostility, and now you've got to deal with that coming back to you because you're creating unwholesome gamma. So he relates this to an individual who's maybe coming with different colors, and they're going to try to make this picture on empty space. Well, what the monks are saying is like, no, you can't make a picture on empty space. Well, it's the same thing as if your mind's pure and you are not aggressive and hostile and bitter back, you can't create any gamma because your mind's pure. You're only creating wholesome gamma. You can't create unwholesome gamma in this situation. So when someone's being bitter and harsh and hostile to you, if you don't allow it to fall on you, because there's no you here, right? If you don't allow it to fall on you and you don't take it personally, then you can just see like, this person is, I should just have compassion for them. I should have concern for their misfortune. It's so unfortunate that this person hasn't learned the natural laws, that they're still speaking in an untimely way. They're speaking falsehoods. They're speaking harsh. They're speaking unbeneficially, and they're speaking with a mind of inner hate. They haven't had the opportunity to learn and practice these teachings in a way that would be beneficial for them and the people around them. So rather than take it personally and having this sound coming into your ear and seeing it as agreeable or disagreeable, just think of it as a sound coming into the ear, that you don't allow it to fall on you. Because if it's empty space, you can't paint a picture there. So if this is just empty space, when somebody's saying something that's unwise, you don't allow it to stick. And now you can be unaffected, right? You don't have to be argumentative and hostile and bitter back. That's what the Buddha is essentially saying. So as people are addressing you in any of these ways, you can remain unaffected. Even when people are addressing you in a wise way, when people are speaking to you timely, when they're speaking to you the truth, gentle, beneficial, and with a mind of loving kindness, don't allow your mind to get excited. Wow, that's so great. These people are practicing the teachings. It's so wonderful to be around loving and kind people. Oh, I just like this so much. Well, if you allow your mind to do that, when you hear the opposite of that, you're going to experience painful feelings. So your mind should remain unaffected. It's nice when people are around you and they're practicing the teachings, but you don't need to get conditioned pleasant feelings based on somebody speaking to you in polite and respectful ways. Because if you allow your mind to do that, then when people are disrespectful and impolite, now you're going to be angry or upset. So you should remain unaffected no matter how people are speaking to you. And then the Buddha goes into this really graphic analogy, this really graphic simile. He's saying, okay, if criminals were to take you and they had a two-handed saw and they were sawing you limb by limb by limb, like they were sawing you at your wrist and then your elbow and then your shoulder. He's saying if your mind has hate at that time, then you're not actually practicing his teachings. Because an enlightened being, they would be impossible for them to actually have hate in that situation. Even if two people were savagely sawing you from limb to limb to limb, it would be physically impossible for an enlightened being to have hate in that situation. They would just have compassion and loving kindness for these beings. Of course, if you can get out of there, get out of there. Don't allow that to happen, right? But if you were there doing that, then what you would like to do is continue to reside having concern for the misfortune of others and having this genuine interest in seeing them be well. Thinking, oh my goodness, this is so unfortunate. Look how unwise they are that they're doing such an unwise thing by savaging people this way and severing them limb by limb by limb, right? So you would like to remain unaffected and utter no evil words, even in this situation where you're being sawed from limb by limb by limb. And the Buddha is saying, okay, if you can think about that and you can do that, then there's no type of speech that you wouldn't be able to endure. Hearing a little bit of harsh speech, hearing a little bit of unbeneficial speech, hearing a little bit of hateful speech, no big deal. If you can, take this severing from limb to limb to limb, then anybody speaking to you in unwise ways, that's a piece of cake. So that's what the Buddha is helping you to be able to see. Now, of course, if you were in this situation, you would like to try to get out of it as best you can. You don't just lay there and let somebody savage you and sever you from limb to limb to limb. But the Buddha is using this as an analogy to show you this really extreme thing and then saying, okay, well, if you can do that, then you can do this over here where you reside unaffected by somebody's speech. So let me see what questions you guys have here. It looks like Roxanne has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, David. I was on a Zoom call a while back with a group of people that I have been meeting with for a while, and there was really some harsh speech, not at or towards me, but I didn't feel really comfortable about where the conversation was going. And they were talking about trying to convince someone of their own point of view. And I asked the question, well, why was it important that they take on your point of view rather than their own? It seemed like a very, very egotistical situation to me. But there wasn't, it wasn't confrontational in any way, but I felt really uncomfortable in that situation because I didn't feel that the speech was had any mindfulness. And I don't know how to continue with these people in that sense.
Okay, so there's two sides to this. One side is, of course, that there's some craving in your mind. You're having a desire for everybody to speak a certain way. And when you're not getting that, the mind is uncomfortable. Even if it was a slight little bit of uncomfortableness, that means there's a slight little bit of craving in there. And you would like to stamp that out, and you would like to eliminate that. The Buddha talks about it as destroying and obliterating these cravings so that they're no longer subject to future arising. And one of the ways for you to be able to eliminate these cravings and desires is to put the mind in the situation that it doesn't want to be in, is to be around some people that are speaking this way. And depending on your life, that might not be too hard, that maybe occasionally you'll be around people that are like that. And this will give you an opportunity to practice that in those situations, you're going to need to practice residing peaceful and calm and unaffected by what other people are saying and what they're doing. That's ultimately what you would like to get to. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is you would like to cultivate relationships where people are doing wholesome things and they're into wholesome things. This is going to help you. But at the same time, if you were only ever around people who spoke perfectly, you would only ever be around enlightened beings. That's it. And you probably don't know too many enlightened beings, right? So you're going to need to get used to being around people who aren't speaking wisely. So depending on what your relationship's like with these people, if it's just the speech and that's it, I would encourage you to continue to, expose the mind to this, because it's very helpful for the mind to eliminate its craving. One of the ways that I used to think about it is like if you had a wet rag and you were trying to wring out every last little drop of this rag, you would like to really wring it out and get every last little drop out. And that's what you would like to do with these cravings. That even when you put your mind in these situations and you notice like a time or two that your mind is quite peaceful, even though people are speaking in unwise ways, you would still like to put the mind in these situations occasionally and help ensure that the mind doesn't have any residual craving or clinging, because sometimes you can think that you've stamped out a craving and you can go like 2 or 3 months without experiencing any kind of discontentedness, but then it can kind of crop back up on you. So you would like to kind of sporadically challenge the mind like this and practice being calm and peaceful and comfortable in those situations. But I don't know what else is going on in the relationship. So depending on what else is going on in the relationship, you might decide to move on for other reasons.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I had this awareness during the conversation that I needed to not be judgmental, and to, just to hear what people were saying. But it just didn't feel beneficial, and it didn't feel like it was coming from any kind of loving kindness.
Yeah, you're going to be in these kinds of situations because the people around you don't know the teachings. And now when people are functioning that way, it's going to potentially arise any particular craving that you might have, because more and more, I think that the people here in Chiang Mai, they're starting to be more and more of a community, and people are spending time with each other, not just at the temple, but outside of the temple. And now you guys are getting used to being around people that are, practicing the teachings pretty closely, especially living here in Thailand, with the Thai people practicing pretty closely too. So when you're occasionally around people who aren't practicing the teachings, you might find that a bit challenging, but you would like to overcome that challenge by realizing anything they say is affecting them, because they're the ones who are choosing to say those things and speak that way, and it's affecting them. You don't need to allow it to affect your mind. So ultimately, let's just say you say nothing, and I'm not saying that you should have said nothing, but let's just say you said nothing on that call and you got off the phone or got off the Zoom call and they went out and they tried to convince these other people to think in their way. That's affecting them. It's not affecting you, because it's their choices that are leading to that. So there's skillful ways for you to handle these kinds of things. Like if I was in that situation, I would have probably said, well, you guys do whatever you would like to do. If you think that that's what is appropriate, is to try to convince people to think your way. For me, I tend to not do that. I tend to just let people think the way that they would like to think. And I'm not trying to force my way on others, because I think that each person needs to have their own thoughts, being free of my influence. Now, if they ask me for my thoughts and ideas, I will share that with them, but I'm not going to try to convince them to do things my way. You guys do what you think is best, but this is the way that I found works best for me. And this is a way to kind of like sprinkle a little bit of wisdom into the conversation without giving them unsolicited guidance, because you're just kind of like talking about yourself and the choices that you're going to make. And then you're saying, hey, you guys do whatever you would like to do, but here's the kind of choices that I'm going to make.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And that still wouldn't solve your discontentedness of wanting people to speak a certain way, right? But that's just a way to help people around you in a skillful way.
Right. And I still have to resolve my own desire in that.
Exactly. And that's where sometimes it's good to just sit there and be quiet and don't react in the situation, because that's what craving, desire, attachment is going to want to do, whether it's this type of situation you're describing or any others. That when you hear disagreeable things or you have any disagreeable contact, the mind's going to want to react. That's the craving, the anger, the ignorance. But what you would like to do is respond in these situations. And sometimes the best response is to just be quiet and say nothing at all in some cases.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. Oh, it looks like Yihang has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. I was just thinking about the simile of severe the body limb by limb, and you were about even if you can do that without inner hate, so that you can bear all these impolite conversations. And then I was just kind of jumping into thinking of the karma. If the person who is be treated like that, even is without inner hate and like putting out non-harmful anything, where would this harmful karma coming back to the one who is conducting all this? Is that from their own mind, or
the one who's experiencing getting cut, or the people who are doing the cutting?
people who are doing the cutting?
Yeah, so those individuals have deep craving, deep anger, and deep ignorance to be able to hold somebody down and, sever their limbs savagely, limb by limb by limb. And that's going to all affect them, right? Those individuals, they're going to experience the results of having done that to somebody. And that's the ironic thing about what the Buddha's simile is here. Of course, it's a made-up simile in order to help illustrate a point. But an enlightened being is not going to be in a situation where they are being held down by criminals and being, sawed limb by limb by limb. That's just not going to happen for an enlightened being because they've extinguished their unwholesome karma. But the Buddha is using this as a way to illustrate it. But if somebody chose to cut up a human body like that, they are going to experience the results of their decisions. And there can be multiple things that are going to be experienced as a result of that.
Okay, so even though if it's not coming from the person who they suffer, like they're putting out to, the harm they're putting out to, it would come out from either their craving in their mind or maybe in other situation.
Yeah, anytime anything unwholesome is happening in the world, it's always because of craving, anger, and ignorance. You can take any individual thing or even global conflicts, and if you understand craving, anger, and ignorance, you can trace it to that. Every single unwholesome thing that's ever existed or has existed or will exist, it's all coming from a being making decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance. That's what's producing all unwholesome results in the world.
Thank you very much. I can
Yeah.
also read the next one if there is no other questions or other hands.
Sure, that's perfect. Here you go. Chapter 85.
Okay. Benefits of developing various kinds of meditation. Rahula, develop meditation on loving kindness, for when you develop meditation on loving kindness, any ill will be abandoned. Rahula, develop and cultivate the mind on compassion, for when you develop and cultivate the mind on compassion, any cruelty will be abandoned. Rahula, develop and cultivate the mind on sympathetic joy, for when you develop and cultivate the mind on sympathetic joy, any jealousy will be abandoned. Rahula, develop and cultivate the mind on equanimity, for when you develop and cultivate the mind on equanimity, any aversion will be abandoned. Rahula, develop meditation on unattractiveness of the body, for when you develop meditation on unattractiveness of the body, any lust will be abandoned. Rahula, develop meditation on the perception of impermanence, for when you develop meditation on the perception of impermanence, the conceit I am will be abandoned. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Yihang. So here, these are 6 aspects of cultivation of the mind that the Buddha is reminding you to be able to cultivate. And you've seen these before in other places if you've been taking classes, courses, and retreats with me. These first 4, these are the Brahma Viharas. You might recognize those 4 healthy mental states: loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. These are all mental states that you need to fully cultivate and fully perfect in order to be able to get to enlightenment. So we have loving kindness meditation to develop loving kindness, and then you would like to practice loving kindness in day-to-day life. And this is what's going to eliminate the anger, hatred, and ill will. And then oftentimes what comes along with the loving kindness is the cultivation of compassion. Compassion is the concern for the misfortune of others. And this is going to help to eliminate any cruelty, right? So the mind functioning through loving kindness and compassion. Loving kindness is this genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. Compassion is the concern for the misfortune of others. Now you're being much more loving and kind through your intention, speech, and actions because they're emanating from this mental states of loving kindness and compassion. Then there's this mental state of sympathetic joy that one needs to cultivate. This is going to help you eliminate any jealousy or envy. Sympathetic joy is where you have joy for others' success, even if you didn't contribute to it. So you're going to need to cultivate that in day-to-day life. And the way that you cultivate this is through right effort, that you use your right mindfulness, your awareness of mind. And whenever you see envy or jealousy coming up, you would like to apply right effort and cut that off and let it go. And then also apply right effort to arise the wholesome quality of sympathetic joy. So these mental states that we're talking about here, this is almost like a toolkit, right? That you're going to need to understand what are the symptoms and what is the remedy. It's like a prescription. It's like a doctor, right? So if you know that the remedy for jealousy and envy is sympathetic joy, right away with your mindfulness, whenever you see any jealousy come up, cut that off and let it go, because you know that's a unwholesome quality, that's discontentedness. You would like to cut that off and let it go as a bodily sensation. And then arise through right effort this sympathetic joy, this joy for others' success. And you'd like to do the same thing for these others too, right? The loving kindness and compassion. And then you've got the equanimity here as well. Equanimity is calmness and composure, evenness of temper, especially in a difficult situation. And what the Buddha is saying here is that this eliminates aversion. What aversion is where you're repulsed by something and you're pushing something away. It also helps to eradicate other things as well, so do some of these others. But here he's really focusing on aversion, where you're pushing something away, right? So whenever you see your mind doesn't have equanimity, when it's shaken up and it's uncalm, it's unsteady, you need to be able to cut that off and let it go, eliminate that, and then arise this equanimity, this calmness and composure. And if you need to close your eyes, you need to focus on the breath, take a couple breaths in and out. If that's what you need to do, great, because that's going to rewire the mind. You're not interested in allowing the mind to be wired where it's continually being shaken up, because the longer you allow the mind to dwell in any of these conditions, the mind's just going to stay wired that way. So the sooner you catch it, the better, because then you're reverting the mind and you're rewiring the mind. Then these last two, the Buddha is talking about unattractiveness of the body. This is the meditation to eliminate sexual cravings. This is going to help you to eliminate sexual cravings or lust. And then there's a meditation to realize non-self by helping you to develop the perception of impermanence, to eliminate that conceit or that personal existence view of I am. It trains the mind to let go, like I am this or I am that. There's a meditation that I have in Volume 1, Chapter 11, that helps you to be able to understand how to do that. So all of these, except for 3 of them, you're developing in meditation. So the loving kindness, you're developing in meditation. And as I mentioned, the compassion tends to come along with that. But then you also have this meditation if you need help to eliminate sexual cravings, and you have this meditation to eliminate the conceit of I am, or this personal existence view. Then these others, you're going to need to apply your right mindfulness and your right effort to be able to cultivate these others, and then have them in your back pocket, that whenever you see the symptom, that you can bring in the antidote, which is compassion, sympathetic joy, or equanimity. So any questions on these and how you would employ them in your day-to-day life, you can put it into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. All right, so this is probably a good review for a lot of you guys. All right, so here's chapter 86. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, Keely, go ahead, ma'am.
One who is capable of entering and residing in right concentration. Monks possessing 5 qualities, a monk is incapable of entering and residing in right concentration. What 5? Here, a monk cannot patiently endure forms, sounds, odors, flavors, and physical objects. Possessing these 5 qualities, a monk is incapable of entering and residing in right concentration. Monks possessing 5 other qualities, a monk is capable of entering and residing in right concentration. What 5? Here,
A monk can patiently endure forms, sounds, odors, flavors, and physical objects. Possessing these five qualities, a monk is capable of entering and residing in right concentration. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Keely. So for those of you guys that can remember the Eightfold Path with the jhanas, where the Buddha is describing the jhanas as part of right concentration, that would be residing in right concentration. That's entering and residing into right concentration. What I teach in all the foundational programs is how to practice right concentration, where you're learning about developing your meditation practice and practicing singleness of mind. But then in other programs, I teach you what the jhanas are. These are these 4 preliminary phases that the mind goes through before you get to the first stage of enlightenment. So what the Buddha is saying is that it's not possible for you to enter into the jhanas without being able to patiently endure contact through the sense bases of the eyes, ears, nose, the tongue, and the body itself. So anybody who's trying to figure out whether you're in the jhanas or not, this is something that you can keep in mind, is that if you're getting annoyed or frustrated or agitated based on these kinds of things, then you know that you're not in the jhanas yet. You would like to get to the point where when you see things, when you hear things, when you smell things, when there's certain flavors on the tongue or certain physical objects on the body, that you can patiently endure these. By getting into the jhanas, you'll still have discontentedness. That's not what the Buddha is talking about here. But but you can patiently endure it. You know that these things are happening and you almost are like quietly frustrated. That's the way I describe it, where you're not overtly agitated and annoyed, but when you're in the jhanas, you'll be kind of quietly frustrated for a long period of time until you make your way out of those jhanas and you're making your way further on the path to enlightenment. So someone who is in the jhanas will be able to patiently endure these things. They might be quietly frustrated. They might be quietly annoyed, but they're not going to be overtly frustrated and agitated and complaining and irritated about things that are going on around you. Because you're going to understand by that point that these things are all impermanent and your mind has been trained to a certain degree that you can patiently endure these kinds of things because you know that they're impermanent. So let me know if you guys have questions here. This is insight to be able to help you to delineate and discern whether or not you're in the jhanas or not. And if you're not in the jhanas, this gives you a goal to work towards, to be able to patiently endure any kind of contact coming through the sense bases. Let me know by putting questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or raise your hand in Zoom if you have questions. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So let's go to the next one. This is 87. Would someone like to read this? Okay, I saw a couple of hands. So just take the first one. Go ahead, Yihang.
Okay.
And then
Thank
Samantha,
you.
we can get you on the next one.
Do concentration in the morning, in the middle of the day, and in the evening. Monks, possessing 3 factors, a shopkeeper is capable of acquiring wealth not yet acquired and of increasing wealth already acquired. What 3? Here, a shopkeeper diligently applies himself to his work in the morning, in the middle of the day, and in the evening. Possessing these 3 factors, a shopkeeper is capable of acquiring wealth not yet acquired and of increasing wealth already acquired. So too, possessing 3 factors, a monk is capable of achieving a wholesome state not yet attained and of increasing a wholesome state already attained. What 3? Here, a monk diligently applies himself to an object of concentration in the morning, in the middle of the day, and in the evening. Possessing these 3 factors, a monk is capable of achieving a wholesome state not yet attained and of increasing a wholesome state already attained. Thank you.
Okay, Yihang, thank you. So here, the Buddha is basically talking about meditation. That's the object of concentration. And he's relating it to a business person because this is something that people could understand, that if you have a shop and you're interested in growing the shop and gaining more and more profit and more wealth, that you're going to apply yourself diligently morning, middle of the day, and evening. And because of that, you'll be able to acquire wealth more than what you currently have. And the Buddha is saying the same thing is true about meditation, that if you meditate morning, middle of the day, and evening, this is what's going to produce the most benefits in terms of developing wholesome qualities in the mind. When I was first starting, I used to meditate kind of like once a day, twice a day, and I didn't really know how often the Buddha actually meditated at that point. And then when I knew from this that the Buddha meditated 3 times a day, I made sure that I meditated 3 times every day for like a week or so. And man, the progress was off the charts. If you're meditating once a day, any kind of progress that you would make in like a month or two, you could make that in like a week or two with meditating 3 times a day. Not everybody can meditate 3 times a day, but even if you get 2 per day, this would be wonderful. Just once a day, I can say that someone won't get to enlightenment in this life if they're meditating just once a day. If you would like to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to at least meditate twice a day. And the more you can get 3 times a day, it's just going to accelerate your development. So if you don't have very many years left in your life, don't put pressure on yourself, but you would like to build up to 3 meditations per day. This is what's going to really help you. And even if you're young, even if you're middle-aged, having 3 meditations a day is going to really help you. But at least if you can get to 2, this would be wonderful for you. And you could still get to enlightenment with 2 meditations a day. But if you don't really have much time left in your life, or you don't know how much time you have left in your life, and you like to really work to be able to see a lot of progress, having 3 meditations a day is what's going to really produce the most benefit. So let me know what questions you guys have here. This is chapter 87, where the Buddha is talking about doing meditation morning, middle of the day, and evening. And this is where you can see he didn't have any specific time because he didn't have a watch or anything like this during his lifetime. They hadn't been invented yet. So he would just basically have these anchor points to be able to meditate morning, midday, and evening. So let me know if you have questions here. Okay, yeah, this isn't new for you guys. You guys have heard this before. Viphav, you have a question?
Yeah, just wondering, I know you said before that it's like 30 minutes is probably what you want to get to, and then after that, maybe more is good enough. And you also said that a lot of people who meditate like 8-10 hours a day is not necessary.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've been noticing in my meditation that over time that it seems that the amount I need to do has gone down. It usually would take more time to kind of get the focus, and over time the focus is the concentration is increased, and so it doesn't seem necessary to like do a lot of meditation like for in one go. I would first do like 30 minutes or so, but it doesn't seem like that's the case anymore.
Yeah, would. Oh, sorry, I thought you were done.
Yeah, that's the question. So it doesn't seem necessary that you need to do a lot of meditation, as long as the 30 minutes or so that you can do a fully focused meditation.
Yeah, you would like to get 30 minutes of meditation 2 to 3 times a day. That would be what you would like to do. If you're doing meditation the way that the Buddha teaches, where when your mind moves off the breath, you're cutting off and bringing the mind back, you're not going to be able to do much more than 30 minutes. I can actually count on one hand, probably, maybe 2, but probably one hand, how many times I've ever meditated for more than an hour, right? Like the vast majority of my meditations have been between 30 minutes and 45 minutes. In terms of all the years that I've been meditating, the number of times that I've meditated an hour or more, very minimal, less than 5 probably, maybe 6 or 7, but not more than that. So these places where people are meditating for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, I would suggest that they're probably not meditating the way that the Buddha taught. Because a lot of times what I hear that they're doing is they're sitting there thinking about their thoughts, they're trying to cultivate wisdom, they're trying to think about all these different things. They're not cutting off and letting go. If you're cutting off and letting go, your mind's going to be utterly exhausted if you get anywhere close to an hour or beyond, and it would be hard for you to really meditate for any longer than that. So I would encourage people to really look at getting to a solid 2 for 30 minutes each session. If you can get to a solid 2 for 30 minutes each session, that's what you would like to get to. Anything more than that is just going to be bonus, and it's going to help you to make progress even more quickly. Even though you're not trying to get to enlightenment quick, this will just create more improved progress as you're getting beyond 2 sessions for 30 minutes or more. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. When you said 3 sessions, that would also be 30 minutes or more.
Yeah, if you can get to a solid 2 for 30 minutes, I could say that you'll get to enlightenment in this life. If you are going to 3 sessions for 30 minutes or more, you're just going to get there a bit sooner than, quite a bit sooner than if you were doing less than that. So a solid 2 for 30 minutes to me is minimum. That's what you would like to be doing. A solid 2 for 30 minutes. That's the minimum. If you're doing anything less than that, it would be very challenging for you to get to enlightenment in this life. But anything more than that, you're just going to get there a bit sooner.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Samantha, you have a question here?
Yeah, this is just to, I guess, jump off Vibhav's question. Where does the 30-minute suggestion come from? Is that from a teacher that you've had or other teachings, or just practical experience on your part?
That's from my own practical experience. When I was meditating 5, 10, 15 minutes, early on, you can see a little bit of improvement. And I'm sorry for the analogy, but I think you guys will all understand this, that if you remember back to if you've been drinking alcohol, when you have that first beer or two, you can get really loopy and really drunk. But over time, as you drink more, it takes 5, 6, 8, 10 beers or drinks in order to really get any kind of heedlessness, right? So we're not talking about heedlessness here. We're talking about heedfulness. And it's actually the same thing. Like when you first start meditating, 5 or 10 minutes can be really impactful for you. And you can really notice a significant improvement to the mind in just a short period. But then as you start doing more and more meditation, after you get to like a month or so, that 5 or 10 minutes is nothing anymore. It doesn't even affect the mind. You really got to increment that up to like 15, 20, 30 minutes. And what I noticed was 30 minutes was the sweet spot. That was the part where I had made significant progress and the mind also wasn't completely tired and exhausted. Whereas if I went closer to an hour, I would get out of the meditation, almost exhausted. And then I heard of a research study that scientists who are actually looking at the brain and they're studying meditators, they were saying that they noticed the most significant improvements to the brain, even though the mind and the brain are two different things. They noticed the most significant improvements at the 25-minute mark. And this was exactly what I had already knew without having seen that research. And if you count the chanting, because it's 2.5 minutes on the way in, 2.5 minutes on the way out, that's a 25-minute meditation, right? So what I had already discovered on my own was being supported by scientific research. So that's why I recommend the 30 minutes, because that's what I see works best. Okay, let me see if we have any other questions here. All right, I don't see any other questions. So Samantha, I think you're up for this next one, chapter 88. So if you'd like to go for that one.
Thank you for your answer.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Remote lodgings in forests and jungle groves are hard to endure. Venerable Sir, I wish to retreat to remote lodgings in forests and jungle groves. Remote lodgings in forest and jungle groves are hard to endure, Upali. Solitude is hard to undertake and hard to delight in. When he is alone, the woods steal the mind of a monk who does not gain concentration. It can be predicted that one who says, I do not gain concentration, yet I will retreat to remote lodgings in forests and jungle groves, will either sink or float away. Suppose, Upali, there was a large lake and a bull elephant, 7 or 8 cubits in size, would come along. He might think, let me enter this lake and playfully wash my ears and back. I will bathe and drink, come out, and set off wherever I want. He then enters the lake and playfully washes his ears and back. He bathes and drinks, comes out, and sets off wherever he wants. How so? Because his large body finds a footing in the depths. Then a hare or a cat comes along. It might think, how is a bull elephant different than myself? I'll enter this lake and playfully wash my ears and back. I will bathe and drink, come out, and set off wherever I want. Then, without reflecting, it hastily enters the deep lake. It can then be predicted that it will either sink or float away. Why so? Because its small body does not find a footing in the depths. So too, it can be predicted that one who would say, I do not gain concentration, yet I will retreat to remote lodgings in forests and jungle groves, will either sink or float away. Come, O Pali, reside within the community. While you reside within the community, you will be at ease.
Okay, thank you, Samantha. So this is a great little teaching or discourse for anybody who's thinking about going off to a retreat, because that's what they used to do pretty commonly during the lifetime of the Buddha, is they would go out to the forest all by themselves. And this is where they would do training of their mind in the remote forest. Well, today, what we see is people go away to these retreats where they're maybe there for 10 days, 15 days, 30 days, or something like this. And sometimes people rush off to those very early in their practice. And oftentimes what can happen is the mind almost implodes on itself, where the mind doesn't have the wisdom that it needs to be able to really train in those kinds of environments. So it's like the hare or the cat that it gets washed away. It's not a bull elephant. The bull elephant represents an individual who's deeply trained their mind to a certain degree, has a certain amount of wisdom, and now they can go out into a remote lodging or into the forest. Or today we might think about it as going away to a silent retreat for 10 days or 15 days or 30 days. Sometimes people hear about people going away to these retreats and they just think that this is the end all be all, and let me just rush off to this retreat without even thinking about what they're going to be encountering. When you go to prison, if you're in general population and there's a problem and they would like to punish you, they put you in, isolated confinement. They put you in what's called the hole, right? And now you're in there for however many days all by yourself without any interaction whatsoever, where you're completely quiet, right? And this is like punishment because it's so hard for people to do that. Well, sometimes people are entering into those kinds of situations very early in their practice where they're going away for 10, 15, 30 days at a time where it's completely silent. And again, they put criminals, hardened criminals, in these kinds of environments in order to punish them, right? Because it's very hard for the mind to experience that. And what the Buddha is encouraging you to do is to not do that until you've really trained to a certain degree. So if a brand new student comes along and wants to rush off to a 10, 15, 30-day retreat, I would encourage them to stay among the community and learn and grow and develop for a few years before you go off into those environments. Because where those environments really create the most benefit is that if you've been training for a year, 2 or 3 or 4, and you feel like you've eliminated a fair number of your cravings, desires, attachments, and you would like to put your mind in a situation to see and kind of challenge it, going away to a retreat can actually be really helpful for you, because you're not going to have your special pillow. You're not going to have that special blanket. You're not going to have your special drink in the morning. You're not going to have that special air conditioning that you're used to, right? There's going to be certain things that are not part of that environment, and things are stripped away based on your choices, right? You don't even have your computer. You don't have your mobile phone. You don't have Wi-Fi. You're in these kinds of environments, and you can observe, what is the mind longing, yearning for? Are you missing that special drink in the morning? Are you missing that pillow? Are you missing the air conditioning? What is it that the mind is still longing, yearning for? But now, if you have wisdom in that situation, you're away for 10 days, you can take note of all those attachments. And now when you come out of the retreat, you can start shedding those things. You can start getting rid of those pillows and maybe setting them aside for a few months and train your mind to sleep in other environments. Or you can get rid of that special drink that you have each morning and leave that alone for a few weeks or a few months and maybe do something else. And now you can train your mind to let these attachments go. But then in the future, when you're convinced your mind has let these things go, you could integrate them back in, because maybe this pillow is special for your neck and it helps to be supportive. Or maybe this particular drink that you like in the morning, it's just kind of nice to have it. But you can be convinced that you've let it go because you've gone several weeks or several months without it, and you can see that your mind is just fine without it. But if you try to do that kind of stuff too early, where you put your mind into an environment where you don't have these things and you don't have the wisdom of how to deal with these cravings, desires, attachments, your mind can kind of implode on itself. So the Buddha is teaching his newer student here to stay among the community, because this is going to help you to build up your wisdom. And then when you do go out into a remote retreat, you'll have the wisdom that you need to be successful. Because it's not just a matter of going out on a retreat and, aha, I did it. I got my Facebook post. I've got my pictures. I can brag to my friends that I went to this retreat. That doesn't help you get to enlightenment. What you would like to do is cultivate wisdom so that when you go into the retreat, you can really make the most benefit out of it. And then when you come out of the retreat, that's where the real work is happening. The 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 days in the retreat, that's a blink of an eye. Now, when you're out of the retreat, that's your real life. And you got to create a life where you're working to eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments, where the retreat is just exposing those to you so that you can actually do the work outside of the retreat. And that's how you can take advantage of using these kinds of retreats to your advantage to be able to help you identify your cravings and then eliminate them afterwards. So let me know what questions you guys have here. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So let's go to the next one. Is there someone who would like to volunteer for this? Okay, it looks like Pat's volunteering. Go ahead, sir.
4 times, rightly developed and coordinated, gradually culminate in the destruction of the taints. Monks, these 4 times, rightly developed and coordinated, gradually culminate in the destruction of the taints. What for? The time for listening to the teachings, the time for discussing the teachings, the time for serenity, and the time for wisdom. These 4 times, rightly developed and coordinated, gradually culminate in the destruction of the taints. Just as when it is raining and the rain pours down in thick droplets on a mountaintop, the water flows down along the slope and fills the clefts, gullies, and creeks. These, becoming full, fill up the pools. These, becoming full, fill up the lakes. These, becoming full, fill up the streams. These, becoming full, fill up the rivers. And these, becoming full, fill up the great ocean. So too, these 4 times, rightly developed and coordinated, gradually culminate in the destruction of the taints.
Okay, thank you, Pat. So as you guys probably know, the taints are those pollutions, those 10 fetters, and what you're looking to do is eliminate those from the mind. The Buddha uses the words destroy them or obliterate them, right? You would like to completely eradicate them from the mind. And he's giving you these 4 times that if you develop this and you coordinate it, meaning you plan for this, that this is going to lead and culminate in the destruction of these 10 fetters. And he's giving you these 4 things that would be wise for you to do. The first one is listening to the teachings. If you're attending these classes regularly, you're doing that one. And that's the one that you would like to do, is listen to the teachings. Because how could you learn and reflect and practice if you didn't even listen to the teachings? And nowadays, we can also talk about reading the teachings, right? Because during his lifetime, it was only listening. There was no kind of reading. But nowadays, you have this book series, you have YouTube videos, you have podcasts, all those kinds of things. That's listening to the teachings. So it's not just classes, courses, and retreats. It's also reading, it's watching videos, and it's listening to the podcast. And remember, it's listening to the true teachings of the Buddha, because there's a lot of content out there that's labeled as Buddhist, but it's not necessarily what the Buddha taught. So you would like to get to the true teachings, listening to those and digesting those in whatever format works best for you. We even have audiobooks nowadays. Then the second time is the time for discussing the teachings. The Buddha would encourage his students, they would encourage his students to discuss the teachings. And I do the same thing, that now more and more the students are kind of hanging out with each other, spending time with each other. They're meeting each other, maybe even talking online and things like this. If you guys are discussing the teachings, this brings it up in your mind, in the forefront of your mind. Not that you're trying to teach each other, but you're just trying to talk about the teachings and discuss them, about some of the challenges that you're having, some of your understanding of the teachings, and things like this. And where maybe you're talking with each other and maybe there's a conflict where you guys are like, oh, I don't remember the teachings being that way. And this person like, oh, I don't remember it being that way. That's where you can consult the books, you can consult your teacher, and I can help you to clarify those things. But if you never discuss the teachings it doesn't bring it up into the forefront of your mind, and you're not able to see the misunderstandings that you might have. So discussing the teachings is very helpful. Even students sometimes schedule appointments with me to just teach the teachings. They're not teaching me, of course, but they're talking to me as if they are teaching the teachings, like going through the Eightfold Path or the 5 precepts or the Four Noble Truths, making sure that they understand them. They're just kind of talking about them, and then I can easily show them where they're understanding the teachings and where they're not understanding the teachings. So you're always welcome to use me for those kinds of things as well. Then there's time for serenity. This is time to relax, because you can't just be go, 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 go all the time with the teachings. You need to be able to step back, think about the teachings, reflect on them, implement them into your day-to-day life. So you're going to need some relaxation, some time to step back and give the mind a breather. Then there's time for wisdom. This is cultivation of the wisdom, that if you've listened to the teachings, if you've discussed the teachings, and you've stepped back to reflect on them, allowing the mind to get a little bit of a breather, now the wisdom is going to start springing up in the mind, because you're starting to reflect more and more. You're starting to apply the teachings in your day-to-day life, and this is where more and more wisdom is going to come through. So this is how you destroy the fetters, is by ingesting the teachings in whichever way you choose, by discussing them, by stepping back and thinking and reflecting on them, and then cultivating the wisdom based on your practice and having reflected on the teachings. So let me know what questions you guys have here. Looks like Samantha has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
In regards to the serenity and taking a break, would that be for just, say, a period of time during each day where you're not maybe as mindful as you might be, or would it be for a longer time of rest, say for a week or so, or when you go on vacation and you just feel like you need a break? Like, when would you need the serenity or the break from the teachings, and how long would that be?
Yeah, each situation is going to be a bit different. And the break from the teachings that I'm talking about is like, if you've been, learning in a program pretty readily, and you've been ingesting a lot of the teachings, and you need to step back for a week or two, that's like maybe you just don't read for that week or two. Maybe you just give the mind a breather, but you're still meditating and you're still practicing the teachings in day-to-day life. You're never interested in stopping those things, because as soon as you stop those things, that's where things will unravel on you, because you'll be out there making unwise decisions, and this is just going to produce unwholesome karma. So what I'm talking about is like the listening and the discussing the teachings. There's times to step back from that, because you can only do so much of that before the mind kind of feels overloaded. So if at any point you're starting to feel like, whoa, I'm kind of getting close to a tipping point here, if I keep going, then I'm going to be kind of overloaded. That's where you'd like to step back, whether it's a few weeks or a few days or whatever it is. You would like to be able to do that from time to time. And that also ensures that you're not attached to the classes, you're not attached to the learning, and you can understand that your learning is going to go up and down like this. So you're going to have to judge that for yourself of when you think is the best time to step back in any given situation, whether it's a vacation or just a time that maybe you're at home and you're just like, I'm going to take a week or two off, but don't allow it to lead into complacency. Because if you got a good thing going and you stop it, sometimes it's kind of hard to restart it. So just be sure that if you are stepping back, that you know with 100% certainty you're going to restart it at a certain time, and even set that goal for yourself.
So it's more taking a break from adding on to what you've learned. You still continue what you've learned and with the meditation and whatnot, but you're maybe taking a break from adding to it. Like if you're say exercising, and you find you're getting tired, you're like, okay, I'm not going to go up, that extra mile this week or whatever. I'm just going to maintain where I am, because it's uncomfortable and too much for me. I'm getting fatigued. And then when you're ready, start back again, but you're still continuing with your training.
Exactly. You're never interested in stopping training. It's a full-time job. So the meditation and the actual practice of like right view, right intention, right speech, right action, and all those others. You would like to maintain that, but it's adding new content into the mind for the listening and the discussing. You would like to pause that from time to time and kind of let things ruminate in the mind, let things kind of settle and stabilize. And so you can build some confidence with the things that you're implementing on a day-to-day basis. All right, great questions there, guys. Let's see if we have any others. All right, I'm not seeing any. So there's one more chapter here, chapter 90. Is there anybody who would like to read this one? Okay, Keely, go ahead, ma'am.
One should be mindful and clearly aware. Monks, a monk should be mindful and clearly aware. This is my instruction to you. And how is a monk mindful? Here, a monk resides reflecting on the body as body, dedicated, clearly aware and mindful, having put aside craving and worry for the world, and likewise with regard to feelings, mind, and mental objects. That is how a monk is mindful. And how is a monk clearly aware? Here, a monk, when going forward or backward, is aware of what he is doing. In looking forward or back, he is aware of what he is doing. In bending and stretching, he is aware of what he is doing. In carrying his inner and outer robe and bowl, he is aware of what he is doing. In eating, drinking, chewing, and tasting, he is aware of what he is doing. In passing excrement or urine, he is aware of what he is doing. In walking, standing, sitting, or lying down, in keeping awake, in speaking or in staying silent, he is aware of what he is doing. That is how a monk is clearly aware. A monk should be mindful and clearly aware. This is my instruction to you. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Keely. So this is something that we've recently talked about in our previous classes, where this first part, the Buddha is talking about right mindfulness and the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Being aware of the bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects. You need to know what all 4 of those are and build more and more mindfulness and be aware of what those things are when they're arising, right? So you need to build that mindfulness. Then having clear awareness of the mind as you're doing all these different things, that you're not just haphazardly walking through the world and plowing through the world, but you're aware of your bodily movements, you're aware of the mind as you're making your way through a crowd, for example. You're not just bumping into people and haphazardly running into people. You need to be aware of these kinds of things. So you need to have that virus scanner, that mindfulness running at all times, where you're aware of the bodily sensations, any feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects. More and more, you're going to be paying a lot of attention to the bodily sensations and the mental objects whenever those fetters are arising. More and more, you won't even be having conditioned feelings, and it won't be affecting the condition of your mind because you're stopping it at the bodily sensations and cutting it off and letting it go. That's what you would ultimately like to be getting to. And then as you're out and about in your day-to-day life, having clear awareness of the mind. You would like to be practicing that mindfulness at all times. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter, if any at all. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Okay, it looks like Yihang has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
David, I recently feel like there is a sense of tiredness or sleepiness coming up when some sensation that I failed to cut off. And then, how do you say, like the mind might even become a bit muddy. But I then tried to cut off the sleepiness and try to make the mind clear, but also at the moment failed to do that. If continue to apply the mindfulness, would you suggest that I just be aware that mind is getting sleepy or tired?
Yeah, the mindfulness is there to help you see that the mind is getting sleepy, and then you can take action. And where possible, I would say get some sleep. You know, if you're noticing that you're regularly getting sleepy during the day, you should look at maybe going to bed a little bit earlier or waking up a little bit later, making sure that you're getting the rest that you need so that you're not depleting your mind through not getting the rest that you need. You need to be able to have a really good rest each night, and this way the mind can perform optimally each day. So if you're noticing sleepiness, one of the best things to do is just get some sleep. You're not going to be able to necessarily cut that off. The only time that I would say to cut those things off, like when I went to Mexico this last trip, there was a couple of days, maybe 3, 4, 5 days, where when we were leaving the center where I was teaching, we were driving in the car, and maybe at like 4 p.m., I felt a little bit of sleepiness come on, maybe like 5 or 10 minutes of sleepiness. And I was trying to cut that off because I was not interested in allowing the mind to sleep, because I knew my sleep schedule would get off, and I was not interested in doing that. So those are the only situations that I would say kind of cut that off and try to maintain your alertness. But if you're kind of at your home country and you're, in your normal life and you're noticing sleepiness, I would look at how much sleep you're getting and just make sure you're getting enough sleep. And then where you're not getting sleep, be sure to get the sleep that you need so that the mind can be fresh each day.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm going to check one more time if we have any questions anywhere. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere else. So next week, we're going to be in volume 3 still, chapters 91 through 100. We're going to have another maybe 3 weeks in this particular book, maybe even 4 weeks, because it goes all the way up to chapters 124. And then we're going to end up starting volume 4 after that. So if you'd like to read these chapters before or after class, you're welcome to do that. Because remember, you've got the words of the Buddha, you've got the reference back to the Pali Canon, and you've got words from me to be able to help you there. Because in these classes, I'm not teaching nearly as much as I've written into the books. So if you're reading the books and attending the classes, that's going to get the most benefit for you. So if you'd like to continue to read before or after class, that would be ideal. And then attending the classes each week is going to help you to gradually build up your wisdom. Tomorrow in the group learning program, we're going to be starting from the very beginning. We're starting a brand new iteration of the group learning program. So if you or anybody else that you know would like to start from the very beginning, that's going to be starting tomorrow at 9 a.m. Thai time and 9 p.m. Thai time. So that's something that's available for everybody. So each Sunday and Wednesday, I'll be doing the group learning program, which is really good foundational program for anybody who's starting out on the path, or they would like a refresher of that content. And then on Monday, we have a Harmony in Relationships course that is starting. It's going to be Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. So whether you're here in Chiang Mai or you'd like to attend through the live stream, that's available for you guys too. I'm going to be teaching all the content to be able to help you understand how to build harmony in your relationships. So thank you for those of you guys that read. Thank you for asking questions. Thank you for those of you guys that just attended and that were just interested to learn. I really appreciate your dedication and diligence to learning and practicing these teachings. So perhaps we'll see you guys in a future class. Have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Sawadee krap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.